Was there a forgotten war in the American Midwest? That's a good question. Many people don't know much about the Black Hawk War, but it was a real and bloody conflict. It happened in 1832, mostly in what is now Illinois and Wisconsin. It was a short war, but it had a big impact. It changed the lives of Native Americans forever in that region. And it opened up a huge area for American settlement. It's a story about land, misunderstanding, and violence. It's a story worth remembering, even if it often gets overlooked. The story starts a long time before the shooting began. It starts with the land itself. The American Midwest in the early 1800s was a vast place. It was full of prairies, forests, and winding rivers. The Mississippi River was like a huge highway. Many different Native American nations lived there. For hundreds of years, they had their own ways of life. Among the most important groups were the Sauk and Fox people. They were often called the Sac and Fox. They lived along the Rock River in what is now Illinois. Their main village, Sauk, was big and strong. It was near where the Rock River meets the Mississippi. It was a very important place to them. The Sauk and Fox had a mixed economy. They were farmers, hunters, and traders. In the spring and summer, they lived in their villages. They planted corn, beans, and squash. The women did most of the farming. The men hunted deer and other game. In the fall, they went out on the prairies to hunt buffalo. In winter, they moved to smaller camps for hunting and trapping. This way of life had been passed down for generations. It worked for them. They understood the land deeply. They knew its seasons and its bounty. Their idea of land ownership was different from the Americans. They didn't see land as something you could buy or sell like a tool. They saw it as something given by the Creator. It was for everyone in the tribe to use. They believed in shared use, not individual ownership with fences and deeds. They used the land for their villages, their fields, and their hunting grounds. These lands were their ancestral home. They had buried their ancestors there. Their history was tied to every river and hill. But things were changing fast. The United States was growing. People from the east were moving west. This was after the Louisiana Purchase in 1803. The government wanted to clear the way for settlers. They wanted Native Americans to move further west. This led to many treaties, and these treaties often caused trouble. One of the most important and controversial treaties was signed in 1804. It was signed in St. Louis. A small group of Sauk and Fox leaders went there. They were there to discuss an incident where some Sauk warriors had killed American settlers. But while they were there, they signed a treaty. This treaty supposedly gave away a huge amount of land. It was over 50 million acres. This land included their main village of Saukenuk. In exchange, the Sauk and Fox would get some goods and an annual payment. They also got a promise they could stay on the land until it was surveyed and sold. But there were big problems with this treaty. The Sauk and Fox leaders who signed it might not have understood what they were doing. Some say they were drunk, others say they didn't have the authority to give away land for the whole tribe. And most of the Sauk and Fox people never agreed to it. They didn't even know it happened for a long time. They believed their leaders only went to St. Louis to talk about the murder incident, not to sell land. This treaty was the root of all the trouble. It set the stage for what would happen decades later. The Americans saw it as a legal sale. The Sauk and Fox saw it as a betrayal and a fraud. Among the Sauk people, a warrior named Black Hawk grew up. He was born in Saukenuk in 1767. He became a respected leader. He fought against the Americans in the War of 1812. He sided with the British and Tecumseh. He saw how the Americans pushed people off their land. He was wary of them. He believed in holding on to his people's traditions and their land. He watched the tensions grow around his home. He knew a conflict was coming. The Treaty of 1804 was a shadow hanging over his people. It was a promise that the Americans would one day come for their land, and that day was getting closer and closer. The years after the 1804 treaty were tough. The treaty said the Sauk and Fox could stay on their lands until they were sold. But that promise was weak. American settlers didn't wait. They kept moving west. They pushed onto Sauk lands. They built cabins, fenced off fields, and started plowing. They moved into the Sauk and Fox village of Saukenuk. They even plowed over Sauk graves. This was a deep insult. The Sauk and Fox found their fields taken, their hunting grounds shrunk. Their way of life was being destroyed. The Sauk and Fox people split into two main groups. One group was led by Keokuk. Keokuk was a Sauk chief. He believed it was better to try and get along with the Americans. He thought fighting was useless. He advised his people to move west of the Mississippi River. He knew the Americans were too strong. He wanted to save his people by making peace, even if it meant giving up their homeland. His followers were called the Peace Party. They started to move across the river into what is now Iowa. But Black Hawk saw things differently. He was older than Keokuk. He remembered his people's strength. He remembered the old ways. He did not believe the 1804 treaty was valid. He said the men who signed it had no right to sell the land. He felt it was their duty to stay and defend their ancestral home. He believed they had been tricked. He was stubborn. He gathered a group of about 1,000 people. This included warriors, but also many women, children, and elderly people. They were known as the British Band. This name came from his past alliance with the British in the War of 1812. He refused to abandon Saukkoonuk. The pressure on Black Hawk's band grew intense. In 1829, the government surveyed the land around Saukkoonuk. They started selling it to settlers. The state of Illinois told the Sauk and Fox to leave. American squatters began to move right into the village. They took over the homes of the Sauk people. They even threw out their possessions. The Sauk came back from their winter hunts to find their homes occupied. It was a terrible situation. In 1831, Black Hawk made a stand. He brought his band back to Saukkoonuk. He tried to plant corn again. He told the settlers to leave. He said this was his land. The settlers got scared. They called for help from the Illinois governor. The governor called up the militia. He also asked for federal troops. A large force of about 1,600 men gathered. They marched to Rock River. They showed their strength. Black Hawk saw this. He saw the numbers. He knew his small band of mostly unarmed people could not fight such a force. He agreed to cross the Mississippi. He signed a new treaty, promising to stay west of the river. His people moved across the river into Iowa, but life there was hard. The land was not as good for farming. They had trouble finding enough food. Other tribes already lived there. There were conflicts over hunting grounds. Black Hawk's people grew hungry and desperate. Many grew sick. They missed their old village. They missed the familiar fields and forests of Illinois. They felt tricked and betrayed again. They thought they had given up their land for nothing. Black Hawk felt a deep responsibility for his people. He saw their suffering. He knew the land in Illinois was fertile. He knew they could grow food there. He believed they had been cheated. He also believed that the British, and maybe other tribes, would help him. This was a false hope, but he held on to it. He decided to lead his people back across the Mississippi River. He hoped to plant corn and live peacefully in their old village. He was not looking for a fight. He just wanted to feed his people. He wanted to go home. This decision, born of desperation and a longing for home, would start the war. It was a risky move, but Black Hawk felt he had no other choice. In April of 1832, Black Hawk made his fateful move. He led his British band back across the Mississippi River. This wasn't a war party. It was a band of about 1,000 people. Most of them were women, children, and old folks. There were only about 500 warriors. Their goal was simple: to go to their old planting grounds on the Rock River in Illinois. They wanted to plant corn and live. They wanted to avoid conflict. Black Hawk even sent messages to white settlers saying they just wanted to plant corn. But the settlers didn't see it that way. They saw an invading force. They remembered Black Hawk's past as a warrior. They saw the movement as a threat. News spread fast, people panicked. The Illinois governor, John Reynolds, immediately called up the state militia. He asked for help from the federal government. He declared that Illinois was in danger. The stage was set for war, even if Black Hawk didn't want one. The Illinois militia started to gather. These were citizen soldiers. Many were farmers. They had little training. They were eager to fight, but also easily scared. Among them were some men who would become very famous later. A young Abraham Lincoln was a militia captain. Zachary Taylor, who would become president, was a Federal Army colonel. Jefferson Davis, who would lead the Confederacy in the Civil War, was a young lieutenant. The first real clash happened on May 14, 1832. This event is known as Stillman's Run. A group of about 270 Illinois militiamen under Major Isaiah Stillman was camped near Sycamore Creek. They were looking for Black Hawk's band. Black Hawk knew they were coming. He sent out 3 old men with a white flag to meet them. He wanted to talk, but the militia troops were undisciplined. They captured the 3 emissaries. They killed one of them. Black Hawk also sent out a small group of warriors, maybe 40 of them, to watch the militia. When the militia attacked the old men, Black Hawk's warriors charged. They thought the old men were being killed. What happened next was a complete surprise. The small group of Native American warriors ambushed the much larger militia force. The militia panicked. They were scared. They fled in disarray. They didn't even stop to fight. They ran all the way back to Dixon's Ferry, about 25 miles away. They told wild stories about being attacked by thousands of warriors. This battle, or rather this rout, was a huge moment. It made Black Hawk seem very strong. It scared the settlers even more. They thought Black Hawk was a brilliant military leader leading a huge army. But it was mostly a fluke. It showed how poorly trained and undisciplined the militia was. Stillman's run turned Black Hawk's peaceful return into a full-blown war. Black Hawk's intentions didn't matter anymore. The war had started. Now, everyone was looking for Black Hawk. The fighting would not stop. After Stillman's run, Black Hawk realized he was in a war, but he still didn't have many supplies. He didn't have much food. His band still included many non-combatants. He tried to move his people away from the main American forces. He sent out small parties to raid settlements for food. These raids sometimes turned violent. Settlers were killed. This further fueled the American desire for revenge. The U.S. government got serious. General Henry Atkinson took command of the federal troops. More militia were called up. The Americans now had a huge force. They started a relentless pursuit of Black Hawk's band. The chase went through northern Illinois and into what is now southern Wisconsin. It was a difficult journey for everyone. The terrain was rough. Supplies were scarce. Black Hawk's people were suffering greatly. They were constantly on the move. They couldn't stop to plant crops. They were starving. Sickness spread through the band. Many people died from hunger and disease. Some of the Native American warriors, seeing the hopelessness, began to desert. They left to try and save their families. And Black Hawk was trying to protect his people, not conquer territory. He was trying to escape. There were other skirmishes during the chase. At Apple River Fort, a small group of settlers held off an attack by Black Hawk's warriors. At Kellogg's Grove, there were more fights between militia and Native American warriors. These were small but bloody engagements. They added to the tension and the death toll. By July, Black Hawk's band was desperate. They were trying to get to the Mississippi River. They hoped to cross it and escape into Iowa. They were being pursued by a large American force. On July 21st, 1832, they reached the Wisconsin River. This led to the Battle of Wisconsin Heights. The Black Hawk's warriors fought a brave rearguard action here. They fought hard to hold off the American soldiers and militia. This allowed many of the women, children, and elderly people to try and cross the river. It was a heroic effort to save their families, but it came at a high cost. Many warriors were killed. The crossing of the Wisconsin River was chaotic. Many people drowned. Still, a good number of Black Hawk's band made it across. They were still being chased. Their only hope was to reach the Mississippi. They moved west, starving and exhausted. They were on their last legs. On August 1st, 1832, the remnants of Black Hawk's band finally reached the Mississippi River. They found a steamboat there, the Warrior. The Warrior had some soldiers on board. Black Hawk tried to surrender. He raised a white flag, but the soldiers on the steamboat didn't trust him. They thought it was a trick. They opened fire with a cannon and muskets. They killed about 23 Native Americans. The Warrior then left to refuel. The next day, August 2nd, was the end. The main American forces, led by General Atkinson, caught up with Black Hawk's band at the Mississippi. This happened near the mouth of the Bad Axe River. What followed was not a battle in the usual sense. It was a massacre. Black Hawk's people were trying to cross the river. They were building makeshift rafts. Many were swimming. They were exhausted, starving, and sick. The American soldiers and militia attacked. They fired into the desperate crowd. They shot people in the water. They bayoneted children. They showed no mercy. The Warrior returned and fired into the fleeing people again. The massacre lasted for hours. Estimates vary, but likely more than 150 Native Americans were killed. Some say it was over 250. Many of these were women and children. Only a handful of American soldiers were killed or wounded. It was a slaughter. Black Hawk escaped the immediate massacre, but his band was destroyed. The war was over. He knew it. He fled north. He tried to find refuge with the Ho-Chunk Winnebago people. But they were also under pressure from the Americans. They eventually turned him over. Black Hawk was captured on August 27, 1832. The Forgotten War ended with a brutal and one-sided slaughter driven by fear and revenge. After his capture, Black Hawk was taken as a prisoner. He was held at Fort Crawford. Then he was sent to Jefferson Barracks near St. Louis. He was even paraded around the eastern United States. He met President Andrew Jackson. It was a strange tour for a defeated warrior. He was a curiosity. During this time, he made a famous speech. It's often called Black Hawk's Lament. He spoke of his love for his people and his land. He talked about how he had been wronged. He said, "I fought for my countrymen against the white soldiers, but they were too many. Our women and children became hungry and we were forced to go, and now I have no place to put my foot." The Black Hawk War had a huge and lasting impact. For the Sauk and Fox people, it was devastating. They lost their last remaining lands in Illinois and Wisconsin. They were forced to move west of the Mississippi River. They lost their traditional way of life. Their culture was disrupted. Their population was greatly reduced through war, disease, and starvation. They never fully recovered their old strength. For the United States, the war opened up vast new territories for settlement. The Sauk and Fox were no longer a barrier. Settlers poured into Illinois and Wisconsin. The war cemented the idea that Native Americans would always have to move when Americans wanted their land. It was another step in the westward expansion, and a bloody one. But why is this war often forgotten? There are a few reasons. One is its scale. Compared to the American Civil War or even the War of 1812, the Black Hawk War was small. It was short. It lasted only a few months. Another reason is that it was just one of many conflicts. There were many wars between Native Americans and the U.S. government. This one just blended into a larger pattern of displacement. Also, the winners write history. The Americans wanted to tell a story of progress and expansion. The darker side, like the massacre at Bad Axe, was often downplayed or ignored. It didn't fit the narrative of a noble frontier. The war also happened before other big events that overshadowed it. It was a regional conflict. It didn't affect the whole country directly. Still, the Black Hawk War left important legacies. It showed the violent reality of U.S. Indian policy. It highlighted the clash between two very different views of land and ownership. It also launched the careers of many future leaders. Abraham Lincoln, Zachary Taylor, and Jefferson Davis all served in it. Black Hawk himself became a symbol. He represented a Native American leader who fought to keep his people's land and traditions. He fought against overwhelming odds. His story reminds us of the human cost of westward expansion. It reminds us of the people who lost everything. So, was there a forgotten war in the American Midwest? Yes, there was. The Black Hawk War was real, it was a tragedy, it changed the landscape and the lives of people forever. It's a part of our history that deserves to be remembered. Remembering it helps us understand the complex and often painful story of how this country was formed. It helps us see the different perspectives and the heavy cost of those early years.